Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have one more presentation. The last presentation will be presented by Professor Toshiyuki Sadanobu, Ph.D. from Japan. I will read the brief biography. Professor Dr. Toshiyuki Sanabu from Kyoto University, Japan. He is a lecturer on communicative grammar theory. His research field are examination of views on languages, communication, and speech by considering human communicative grammar collectively from the standpoints of both processing information and social interpersonal interactions. In the last 10 years, his research focuses on funny talks made by native Japanese speakers and learners of Japanese in all over the world in 20 countries region. Without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Toshiyuki Sadanobu to present your paper. Time is yours, sir.
I am very honored to be invited to this splendid gathering and to have this opportunity to speak to you all. First of all, I think that it would be better to introduce one of my research activities, which is called My Funny Talk Contest. Oh. For the last 10 years, I have collected funny talks roughly 2 or 3 minutes in length, made by various native Japanese speakers through the My Funny Talk contest, and released these on the internet in video form with subtitles as a My Funny Talk corpus. Furthermore, for the last 6 years, I have opened the contest to non-native speakers of Japanese language in addition to native Japanese speakers. And I have received entries through now from non-native speakers in more than 20 countries or regions, including Indonesia, of course. At this time, the recorded talks number 563. The breakdown of them is shown in this table. 264 are from native Japanese speakers and 272 from non-native speakers. The number of talks by native speakers showed a major increase from 2010 to 2011. This happened because we simply thought that bigger is better for a corpus and worked hard to publicize the contest. But we soon learned the pitfall of this simple idea. Judging of the contest is left up to voting by internet viewers. And if there are not a sufficient number of votes, then a contest cannot exist in the first place. However, from the perspective of the voters, who have to view and grade each of these stories by non-professional amateurs, which are not that interesting, an increase in the number of stories leads to a major increase in their burden. And thus in 2011, we had trouble finding internet viewers who would vote for all the stories. Thus, this project is only viable due to a very delicate balance between the contest and corpus. And if the corpus is prioritized too much and we think the more stories, the better, the contest cannot maintain itself. After this experience, we cut back on publicity activities. We allow for various styles of talks, such as monologue, dialogue, uh, telephone, and multi-party for entry. But all of the entries are required to made by using Japanese language, and they should be spoken language, spoken Japanese rather than written Japanese. This is because we think the funniness of a story depends not only on the story itself, but also on the manner in which the story is performed. Entries are recorded and released to the public, not just as audio, but as full video. This is due to the growing acceptance of the idea advocated by Peter Auer, Charles Goodwin, and Kazuyoshi Sugawara, for example, that there are limitations on what can be done using an audio corpus with no video. In addition to audio and video, we attach Japanese subtitles to the entries, and downloading of subtitles is enabled. The rationale is to provide text information to enable use of language processing and to provide support for stories whose audio is difficult to hear due to the recording environment. This also reflects concern for making the stories easy to understand for the viewer, particularly for Japanese learners who do not have sufficient Japanese language abilities. In addition, for the 2010 stories, a trial was made of providing subtitles in English, Chinese, French, as well as Japanese. Here is just one example. So the content can be understood even by people with no experience learning Japanese. For the same reason, subtitles in Russian were provided for the stories in 2013. These videos can be downloaded and quoted freely by anyone for academic purposes. This is because legal problems relating to portrait rights, copyrights, and similar issues are solved by exchanging documents beforehand with contest applicants. In this regard, my funny talk corpus is clearly distinguished from content, such as videos uploaded to YouTube. As a result, despite its frivolous despite its frivolous image, the My Funny Talk corpus is the world's only Japanese language corpus with audio, video, and subtitles currently available to the public free of charge on the internet. We believe that recording and releasing documentation of this modern storytelling is significant in itself. For more details and many findings concerning this corpus, please see my English paper or a Japanese book edited by me. Today, I shall focus on two distinct features of Japanese culture and language, which my funny talk corpus reveals about. The former is concerned with the content of funny talks. Japanese people tend to narrate their own funny experiences much more than ready-made jokes and anecdotes. And the latter is concerned with the manner of funny talks. Japanese people are lenient about this fluency. I shall show them one by one. Native Japanese applicants show a strong disposition preference concerning the content of funny talks. They never talk stories of fictional people, nor people unrelated to them, such as one beginning after a shipwreck, a man landed on a desert island alone. I shall call such funny talks as jokes and anecdotes hereinafter. Rather, native Japanese speakers are much more interested in recounting their own funny experiences. This forms a striking contrast to non-native speakers of Japanese. For example, let us take a look at the fifth contest conducted in 2014. As I said earlier, this was the first to receive talks from non-native Japanese speakers. There were 51 talks in total from non-native speakers, in which 8 jokes and anecdotes were included, and two of them are
Kelas
es-
itu jangan ganggu, muncul nanti.
and,
Keluar ya.
and two of them are ethnic jokes, but no such jokes and any anecdotes appeared among those from native Japanese speakers. The same is more or less true of the contest of the other years. In Japan, there are virtually no ethnic jokes nor anecdotes. If you talk one in Japan, it might be understood not as a joke nor anecdote, but as a discriminatory remark. So you should be careful about this. Very recently, non-native applicants seem not to speak jokes and anecdotes like native Japanese applicants. But this is just because some Japanese teachers who read our book advise their students not to talk jokes and anecdotes at the contest. It is not the case that jokes and anecdotes are completely lacking in Japanese language society. They are present in the form of professional comic storytelling called rakugo, for example. However, they have not developed in the form of marginal arts. By marginal arts, I mean arts by the non-professional general public, such as song parodies or graffiti. Now let us go on to to Japanese grammar. The orientation of native Japanese speakers toward recounting of their own experiences can be observed even in grammar of Japanese language. In Japanese language, a state can be an event of the speaker's experiencing that state only if that experience is worth talking. I will show just one example. When we explain the surroundings of our house, we can say, there are temples here and there in my neighborhood. And the point is that the same thing cannot be expressed by this Japanese sentence. This Japanese sentence is oh, very strange, as is shown by double question mark at the top of it. In this sentence, the adverb tokidoki, which means sometimes, expresses frequency of 寺院がある an existential state of a tempo around the speaker. That is to say, this sentence literally means there is sometimes a tempo around me, but it is strange. Why is it strange? This is because the frequency word tokidoki doesn't combine with the state. Generally speaking, frequency refers to the distribution of an event over time, and the state is not an event. This is why tokidoki doesn't fit with 自信がある. But this is just a case of non-adventurous sentences. I say non-adventurous because the speaker knows very well about the surroundings of his or her house. In adventurous sentences, things change completely. For example, in a sightseeing bus running in a foreign country, tourist A can say to tourist B, there are temples here and there, aren't there? And the Japanese sentence, 時々寺院があるね, quite naturally means the same thing. The combination of frequency word 時々 and the state 寺院がある is perfect. Why? This is because a state can be an event of the speaker's experiencing that state only if that experience is reportable, worth talking. An adventurous experience of exploring a foreign country is reportable, which makes a state into an event. Generally, it is argued, regardless of language, that talks of experience must be funny or interesting. Specifically, Harvey Sachs, originator of conversation analysis, argues that when a speaker in a conversation begins to discuss an experience of his or hers, then even though another speaker may interrupt at times, the right of utterance automatically returns to the speaker. Based on this, uh, William Labov, sociolinguist, argues that a recounting of experiences must be sufficiently funny or interesting to earn the consent of the others in the conversation to this automatic assignment of the right of utterance. I think the orientation of native Japanese speakers toward recounting funny experiences has some relation with such ideas. But please note here that what Labab refers to is at the level of manners. Even an unfunny recounting of experiences is fully understandable to the listener. However, what we are discussing here is at the level of grammar. A violation would cause the listener to feel strange. Now, let's go on to the second feature, the feature concerned with manner of speaking. Although the speakers must have planned their talk between entering the contest, my funny talk corpus abounds in disfluent speech. Disfluent speech might be natural in talks by non-native speakers, but there are plenty of fillers and speech fragments observed in talks by native Japanese speakers as well. What this indicates seems to be Japanese society's leniency to disfluency. In Japan, being fluent and being excellent are two quite different things, and a man doesn't have to be fluent in order to be excellent. Moreover, the disfluency of native Japanese speakers is partially different from that of non-native Japanese speakers. The most prominent difference between native and non-native speakers lies in the after treatment of this disfluency. Non-native Japanese speakers stop, go back, and restart their speech again whenever they get stuck. But native Japanese speakers often proceed to the remaining part without going back for repairing his or her disfluent speech. Here are two examples of this. In this talk, the speaker gets stuck while pronouncing an adjectival stem, okashi, which means strange. After pronouncing oka, she stops her pronunciation, and there appears a pause. But she does not go back to the beginning of this stem and try to repair her own utterance. Instead, she just proceeds to the remaining part, she. In some cases, speakers don't stop but prolong their utterance when get stuck. In this talk, the speaker prolongs her voice of vowel, kesa vowel, immediately after the first syllable, ke, of a simplex word, kesa, which means this morning. And she goes on to the pronunciation of the second syllable, sa, without going back and repairing. This trend can be observed even in some very formal speech. In a press release held at November 27, 2017, Masato Kitamura, president of Yokozuna Promotion Council, made a pause which lasts over 1 second in the middle of a simplex word, zentai, which means overall. It is not the case that orientation of native Japanese speakers toward recounting funny experiences discussed above is unrelated to their tolerance for disfluency. These two characteristics can be considered together for the perspective of media. Uh, the medium of text is portable. The medium of text letter, is portable and capable of preservation. As a result the language of text tends to discuss general knowledge that can be read by anybody in any place. In addition, since people can read much faster than they can write, normally the writer and the reader are not in the same place. In a time and place where the reader is not present, a writer tends to consider his or her words carefully and revise a text into something highly fluent. In contrast, the medium of voice in principle is less portable. And less portability and less capable of preservation. Voice is ephemeral, fleeting, disappearing at the moment it is uttered. Accordingly, in private gathering, spoken language tends to be language that discusses personal experience. In addition, since basically people speak and listen at the same speed, normally the interaction between speaker and listener takes place face to face in the same place and becomes extemporaneous. Spoken language is not a condensation of meaning based on careful consideration, but tends to be disfluent, reflecting the speaker's unpolished consciousness. Japanese has a long tradition of written language, but from the above points, we can consider spoken language too to remain extremely powerful. The orientation of native Japanese speakers toward recounting funny experiences and their tolerance for disfluency reveal this fact both. Besides funny talk contest, I am now making a string of funny talks. Its system is very simple. After talking a funny story, the speaker introduces the next speaker of funny talk. I hit upon this idea during a long period of refraining from going out because of COVID-19. At that time, I was thinking what I can do as a linguist in order to cheer up somebody and preserve his or her calm. And this string is my answer. It might be a silly idea, but thankfully, many open-minded people, especially academic people like Professor Arimanshal of University Sumatra, Utara, join this project from all over the world and connect themselves by funny talks. Now 33 people are linked together. If you have interest in this project, please contact me. Even if you do not speak Japanese language, then will be somehow okay. That's all for my story. Thank you very much.